Hi, John.
Hey.
You're a hero.
Thanks. It sounds like it.
Thanks for coming all this way. Last time we did this, it was in San Francisco, and you had the exotic accent, and now I have the exotic accent, the exotic American accent. Okay, so you work for this company called King. Some people may recognize your logo because it pops up on their phone a bunch.
Yeah.
But maybe not everybody knows what exactly King does. So maybe let's start there.
Okay.
What is King?
So King is an entertainment company, principally around mobile gaming, and the Candy Crush franchise is the one that people usually have heard of and seen on their journey on the way on the tube. But there are a bunch of other games and a bunch of other things we do as well.
Cool. Okay, so you're a video game company, mobile gaming company. So I will admit that my experience with video games, I wouldn't say it goes it does go all the way back, but it didn't stop at the, not there, but it is not, I'm not an avid mobile gamer. So I take it that your development process is pretty different than the sort of old school, we build a game, we ship it to stores, people go buy it, and then we hope that the reviews are good, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like classically, the huge games, the huge franchises that you play on console and PC, they're enormously expensive to produce. They compete with the kind of A-list game film industry in terms of development costs, whereas mobile games tend to be smaller, start with small teams, keep things very agile, iterate very quickly, and I guess that's where the data comes in, and it's helping that process to drill in very quickly and iterate on that.
And so, I mean, what does that look like from a product manager's perspective? I mean, I imagine it runs the gamut, but roughly how long are they taking to produce a game, and then what does that testing process look like?
It varies depending on the type of game, but typically games go through a process of play testing, soft launching, and then hard launching. And that soft launching process, particularly in the play test, it's all about adding new features and expanding the game as you go, testing that and working out what features resonate with the players, which don't, which are causing churn, which aren't, and really zoning in on that so you can quickly move the product forward without overly investing in a kind of polished end product from the word go, and then hoping you hit that.
And then, so how is that informed by data? I mean, presumably you build a game, you're ready to push it into playtesting. You think it's great, right? Presumably you're building what you think is right. How does that process change as the data starts to come in from real users?
So typically what games performance managers will be looking at is, as I say, around certain features and certain player funnels. So that they're firing events from those games, what's happening at each stage, where are the players dropping off, where are the players spending too much time or too little time. Maybe there's a great idea for a new feature, but in reality the players are just not finding it. Or the data is helping us decide whether those things really resonate with the players or not, if it's something that's kind of more a strategic feature, or in terms of just pure player flow, too much of a bottleneck around a certain difficult level, for example. So it's various things. You're comparing the game to the other games in the portfolio. How is it comparing to our flagship games? Is it going to be the next Candy Crush? But it's also about what's happening within that game itself.
Got it. So it's both the sort of metrics that help them understand, is this going to be a hit? Is it going to be solid? Should we continue to develop it, or do we need a major rework? And then also the sort of understanding the internals of the game. And so I assume that the metrics that tell you how it compares to other games, those are pretty standardized, right?
Yeah, exactly. What we don't want is that KPI sprawl. We don't want that. We want to compare apples with apples. If Candy performed a certain way in its lifestyle, we want to know that we're measuring against it with a similar methodology against that.
And so, does I assume your team, being the sort of core team, you own those daily active user type metrics that are common to all the games. But then, for understanding what the user flow looks like, I imagine that's pretty different inside the teams because each game is unique, right?
Yeah, exactly. What we can't do within a centralized org is understand the forensics of every single game going out, especially when they're across different genres and very different approaches. So our approach is to focus on centralizing truth. As you say, there's the DAO, MAU, WOW, your retention.
Sorry, the DAO, MAU, WOW?
Daily active users, monthly active users, and weekly active users. So
you do that out of order just so you get to say DAO, MAU, WOW?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, got it.
It makes sense to me. So yeah, we're doing that. We're the retention, what an install is versus what it isn't, what constitutes a conversion, for example, what constitutes a transaction. That's where we centralize, and that's what we expose to the outside world through Looker and so on. And then the idea is that within the satellite studios and business orgs, they can then take that and they can build on top of it with the stuff that we would never be able to service with those. We'd end up with the data breadlines, if you like, as Frank was saying.
And presumably they have a much sort of more fine-grained understanding of what matters to them.
Yes.
Given the particulars of the game, right?
Yeah, a centralized org is never going to understand a particular feature in a game that is designed to give the players a certain kind of experience. That's the data scientists in the games, that's the game developers themselves, and that's the performance managers around those games.
And so when you've launched something to playtesting or to soft launch, and the team comes back to make the case for further development, more development resources, how does that go? I mean, did they bring sort of a mix of those core metrics and then also say, and we're doing well, but we also realize there's a bottleneck here and we could solve that by doing X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, exactly. So ultimately there's a couple of angles to it. There's, at the top levels of the company, is this game going to go? Are we going to release this? Is this something we want to continue to invest in? So data plays a big part in informing that decision. But also, when they're thinking about, okay, we're going to need this number of back-end developers or front-end developers to work on these game features. This is what this game might look like when it's in production versus when it's at small-scale kind of incubation stage. That's also a data-driven decision to kind of inform what the breadth of the game is going to look like.
Got it. And so, I mean, I'm always curious to sort of see how in the daily flow of an organization, how data is being used. When people come to those meetings, are they sort of pulling things out, making PowerPoints, or are they actually bringing Looker into a meeting and someone says, oh, but can I see this sliced and diced this way? And they say, sure, and
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one thing I've definitely noticed since got real traction with Looker at King is never previously would I have walked past the meeting room and seen through the window someone with one of our legacy BI tools using it in real time to make decisions there and then. But we increasingly see that, and particularly around user acquisitions and things like that. They're one of the teams that really run with Looker, and it was a kind of seminal moment the first time I walked past that meeting room and noticed people looking at campaign ROI and informing, comparing one campaign with another there and then. And getting this sort of snap back on their query results and getting the answers they want in such time that they're happy to have those conversations rather than pre-canning things.
So it's not, oh, I prepped a deck and some executive in the meeting says, can I have more information about this? And you say, all right, I'll send you an email later. It's actually a live give and take. Yeah,
there's a mixture. I mean, but one of the things that we've used we've tried to surface to people to help them if they still want to go down that process is the API, and saying that you can just plug this directly in. If your PowerPoint presentation's backed up by a bunch of Excel sheets, just use the Looker API. It's one click and right click and refresh with all the latest data. So nice. We try to have a mixture of both. Some people are never going to let go of their habits, but you can help improve them, I guess.
Nice. And then I guess I'm also curious, obviously it sounds like the product teams are deeply sort of driven by data. They really understand, they have to understand what the data says, because otherwise they can't effectively make the case to continue development. Are other teams at King driven by sort of data KPIs, or is it, and where are those coming from? Is it all from the same resource, or?
Yeah, exactly. So, King's always been pretty data-driven. Our CTO is kind of a big advocate of embedding data scientists in the games and in, marketing orgs and so on and so forth. So, data is very deliberately pushed out into every corner of the business. So we expect, whether it's performance marketing or finance, HR to a certain extent, or the games themselves, we expect them to be data-driven, and we expect them to be talking a common language across all of that. And that sort of core data services, that's what that's about. Is we define the truth, we make the products available, be they through Looker or through the data warehouse itself, to say this is what we believe truth looks like, and this is I guess democratized. This is not marketing truth versus finance truth. This is a common.
So you're really saying, we're not going to have different definitions of customer or different definitions of transaction or download that live in each department in some monster Excel workbook, and there's a ton of transforms there, but rather those core definitions are going to live in one place.
Exactly, and that doesn't mean there's not room for nuance, and that's one of the things we've found very powerful from the Looker side of things is with our hub and spoke architecture, we can allow for nuance. We can say, look, here's the truth. It's there. That's the foundation. But if you've got a reason to sort of branch off that in some way, you can do that. And it's transparent. It's understandable. There's the provenance of the data and so on, so that it's not a kind of I downloaded it, I tweaked it, and who knows how I got to that number.
Yeah. But the number is really good because I tweaked it to tell the story that I wanted to tell.
It's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah. And so it sounds like that the sort of the transparency, the lack of a black box drives accountability across the organization. Yeah,
I think that's something we really struggled with in the past, that there is a sense that you push out through a BI tool, and even if you've made 100% of your dashboards and reports, they reconcile perfectly, and we invested an enormous amount of time in that a couple of years ago. That's fine, but if people don't understand where that number came from, it doesn't matter that much. Yes, it's consistent, but who knows how that was arrived at, and not everybody wants to surface data through a dashboard. So this has really helped from a Looker perspective of that, you can see the SQL, you can understand what's happening at query time, and if you're a data scientist particularly, you can just say, okay, yeah, I see, I trusted those tables, I trusted that product, and I can replicate that myself. So
yeah, I think that fundamentally there is that if people don't trust the data, it doesn't matter how available it is, they're not going to use it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's always interesting to hear, as you said, that it's not just, to the extent of HR, right? HR is not necessarily something that people think of as a particularly data-driven department. No offense to any HR people in the room. I'm sure you're very data-driven and great. But it's not the first thing that people think of when they think of a data-driven organization. So it's interesting to hear about the way that you've sort of pushed that all the way out to the edges.
Yeah, and in fact, after a point, we haven't had to do the pushing anymore. It's been a fairly organic process of the tool, our approach to it, having its own traction, and be able to, people starting to gravitate towards it and asking that question of, okay, what can this do for me, rather than us having to sort of stand up and evangelize and say, hey, everybody, we've got a vision, who's with us? We generally try to avoid that, rather more trying to push the idea of these kind of key use cases and these key things that we know will generate momentum and visibility.
Yeah, I think the having been on both sides of that, I think the reality is when you're trying to make the case for use data, it's great, yay, data, that appeals to a certain small slice of people. But when you can go to somebody and say, hey, I can make your daily job easier, I can make your decisions better, that's a much more compelling way to pitch.
Yeah, and actually, once you remove the kind of sales element from it, if we're pitching, that's, as you say, some people are going to resonate with that. But if it's actually your peers who are saying, oh, I was able to solve this problem in a way I couldn't before, that carries way more weight.
Absolutely.
So I'm spoiling all my punchlines for my session later here.
Well, I'll cut it off there so you can save a couple. Thanks so much, John, for putting some real daily life to this, because I think it's always, we start talking about it at the high level, but it's great to hear how it's actually working in an organization.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Cheers.